I always thought of my nephew Kevin as the sweet, confident young man he had grown into. At 24, he was full of ambition with a bright future ahead of him. We had a close bond, the kind that made him feel comfortable, talking to me about almost anything. I've been there for him during his struggles, offering advice or just a listening ear whenever he needed it. But nothing could have prepared me for what he said last night. It started as an ordinary family gathering at my place. Everyone was laughing, sharing stories over dinner. As the night wore on, people began to leave. But Kevin stayed behind. It wasn't unusual. He often stayed late to chat with me. However, this time, there was a different energy about him. He seemed quieter, almost nervous. We sat together in the living room after everyone had gone. The fire was crackling softly, and the dim light cast long shadows on the walls. I noticed Kevin hadn't touched his tea, and he kept looking at me, then glancing away like he had something on his mind. "You seem quiet tonight," I remarked, breaking the silence. "Is something bothering you?" He hesitated, rubbing his hands together, avoiding eye contact. "Aunt Lila," he started, his voice lower than usual. "I need to talk to you about something. It's been on my mind for a while." My heart skipped a beat. His tone was serious. Too serious. "You know you can tell me anything." I reassured him, though. I could feel an uneasiness settling in. "I don't know how to say this, but you've always been there for me. I've been thinking a lot lately about us." "Us," I echoed, confused by his choice of words. Kevin sighed deeply, as if gathering the courage to continue. "I don't mean to make things awkward, but I've started seeing you differently. Not just as my aunt, but someone I admire in a way I don't know how to explain." The weight of his words hit me all at once. My mind struggled to process what he was saying. He was my nephew, my sister's son. And yet the way he was looking at me with such vulnerability told me this wasn't some passing thought. He'd been holding this inside for longer than I realized. "Kevin," I began, trying to keep my voice calm. "I don't think you realize what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying, Aunt Lila," he said quickly, looking up at me with pleading eyes. "I'm not trying to make things weird, but I felt this for a while now, and I didn't know how to bring it up." I was at a loss for words, frozen in place. This was not what I expected. Not from Kevin. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what Kevin had just confessed. I'd always been close to him. Yes, but this was different. He was looking at me in a way that made me feel vulnerable, like I was on the edge of a dangerous precipice. How could I even begin to respond? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Kevin, I don't know what's going on in your head, but this isn't— please don't brush it off." He interrupted, his voice soft but firm. "I've thought about this for months now, and it's been eating me up inside. I've tried to ignore it, to forget it. But I can't." I could see the struggle on his face, the conflict between what he knew was right and what he was feeling. He wasn't some immature kid acting on impulse. He was an adult, someone who had clearly been grappling with these emotions for a long time. But no matter how genuine his feelings were, I couldn't let this go any further. "Kevin, you're my nephew," I said firmly, though my voice wavered slightly. "Whatever you're feeling, it's misplaced. I'm your family. This isn't how things should be." He leaned forward, his expression earnest, desperate. "I know it sounds wrong, Aunt Lila, but I can't help how I feel. You're not just family to me. You've been there for me in ways no one else has. I don't see you the way a nephew should see his aunt. I see you as someone." He hesitated, his voice cracking slightly. someone I care about deeply. I don't know how to explain it. I shook my head, trying to remain composed. This is a lot to process, Kevin. I understand that you care about me, but there's a line that can't be crossed. No matter how you feel, we have to respect that. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I knew you'd say that, and I get it. I really do. But it doesn't change how I feel. I've never been able to talk to anyone about this because I know how wrong it sounds. But I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I had to tell you. His words left me breathless. I had always been the strong one, the one he looked up to for advice and guidance. But now here I was, blindsided by feelings I never thought I'd have to confront. I knew I had to handle this carefully, but I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Kevin, I said, my voice gentle, I care about you too. But not in the way you think. This can't go any further. He didn't reply right away, just sat there staring into the fire. The silence between us grew thick, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know what to say to him. The silence that stretched between us felt suffocating, and I could feel the weight of Kevin's confession. Lingering in the room, my mind was racing, trying to figure out how to handle this without causing more harm. Kevin was family, someone I deeply cared for. But this was dangerous territory. One wrong move and everything between us could shatter. I finally broke the silence, my voice soft but steady. Kevin, I appreciate you trusting me enough to be honest about how you feel. But we have to be clear about something. This can't happen. His eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of frustration and sadness. I know, Aunt Lila. I know I just didn't expect it to hurt this much. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd understand or feel something similar. His words hit me harder than I expected. Did he truly believe there was a part of me that felt the same way? I had never seen Kevin as anything other than my nephew, someone I'd helped raise, guided through life. The idea of anything more hadn't even crossed my mind, and I was struggling to comprehend that he saw me differently. I do understand, Kevin, I said gently. But the way you're feeling, it's complicated. It's not that I don't care about you. I do, but not like that. You're my family, and we can't cross that line. It would change everything, and not for the better. He sighed, leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees. I get that I do, but it doesn't make these feelings disappear. His voice wavered slightly, revealing just how much he had been holding back. I don't want to lose what we have. You won't, I assured him quickly, though I'm not was forming in my chest. But we have to set boundaries, even for both of our sakes. You've always been like a son to me, and nothing is going to change that. But we have to be careful. Kevin looked down at his hands, clearly wrestling with his emotions. It's just, I feel like I've ruined everything by telling you this. I didn't want to make things weird between us. It's not ruined, I said softly, reaching out to place a hand on his arm. I'm glad you were honest with me, but now we have to move forward and focus on keeping things as they were. This conversation doesn't have to change anything if we don't let it. He nodded slowly, but I could see the struggle in his expression. His feelings were real, and I knew it wouldn't be easy for him to let them go. But he had to. We both did. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, the fire crackling softly in the background, casting flickering shadows across the room. I knew this conversation was far from over, and a part of me feared what might come next. The room felt still, almost too quiet as we sat there. Kevin's expression had softened, but the tension between us was undeniable. I could sense that he was still grappling with everything he had just revealed. And though I had tried to reassure him, I knew it wasn't enough to ease the weight of his emotions. "I'm sorry, Aunt Lila," Kevin finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was filled with regret, as if he was ashamed of having opened up. "I didn't mean to put this on you. I just didn't know what else to do. It's been eating away at me for months." I shook my head gently. "You don't need to apologize, Kevin. You were honest, and I respect that. But we need to put this behind us. What you're feeling is natural. In some ways, emotions are complicated, especially when we're close to someone, but it's important to understand that some boundaries can't be crossed." He nodded, though. I could see the inner conflict still brewing beneath the surface. "I just don't want this to change things between us. I care about you so much, and the last thing I want is for this to make things weird." "It won't," I assured him, though I wasn't entirely sure if I believed it myself. This conversation had opened a door that neither of us could close. Still, I had to try to steer us back to safer ground, to preserve the relationship we had always cherished. Kevin looked over at me, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "So what do we do now?" I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. "We move forward. We keep things as they've always been. You're my nephew and I'll always love you. But we need to let this go. You have your whole life ahead of you. Focus on your future, on finding someone who can give you what you're looking for." This was a moment of confusion, but it doesn't have to define our relationship. He stared at the floor, nodding slowly. "I'll try. I don't want to lose you. Aunt Lila, you're too important to me." "You're not going to lose me," I replied softly, squeezing his arm. "We just need to be careful, Kevin. Emotions can be tricky, and sometimes we misinterpret them. But your feeling will pass. I promise." He finally smiled, though it was faint, and I could tell the conversation had left him emotionally drained. "I guess I'll head out. It's getting late." I nodded, relieved that the conversation was ending, but also worried about what might linger in his mind. "Drive safe," I said, walking him to the door. As Kevin stepped outside, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, confusion, and a hint of sadness. Things had changed between us, even if we didn't want to admit it. But I hoped for both our sakes that we could find a way back to how things once were.